Give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. Now, it turns out that the Israelites were actually quite creative with manna. For example, they had manana bread. That's true. They did. Manana witches. And on special occasions, manicotti. They were actually very, very creative with this. And it's not in the Bible, but it's just part of history, and I know it. I know their history very, very well. And they would eat this for the next 40 years until they would finally come to the Promised Land, which they're going to be 40 years in the desert, and we'll explain in a couple of weeks why that is. In chapter 17, Moses once again confronts a problem with their lack of faith that God will provide, and also a challenge to his authority. This will begin a challenge to his authority over and over and over, and he demonstrates God's favor on his life. And he comes to a rock, and they're thirsty. Now, Moses has been 40 years in the wilderness. He is prepared. And in the wilderness, there are these giant cisterns in the sides of the rocks. And this doesn't take away from the story at all, because the real key here is the second time they complain and they want water from the rock. Where the first time, Moses takes his rod and strikes the rock. These cisterns filled up with up to 1 million gallons of water, very high mineral content, covered with crust when it was full. The shepherds knew where these were, and they could get their flocks water by taking their staff, cracking the seal on the side of the rock. Water flowed from the rock, giving them water. Someone would say, "Oh, I thought it was like a big piece of granite." Doesn't say that. I'm just telling you, remember when we study about the literal sense, literal meaning? This is what happened in the desert. Now, he did that. Water flows from the rock. Later on, they're going to complain again, and what does God say to Moses? Speak to the rock. And the rock is Christ, Paul says in Corinthians. Speak to the rock. And what does Moses do? He goes back to what he knows best, ingenuity, relying on his own strength, and he strikes the rock twice, and God says, you have dishonored me in front of the people. You are not leading the people into the land. And so this is a demonstration here of the fact that Moses knows the land, and he's a provider for the people. And then we have the story of Moses holding up his hands. As long as his hands were held up when they were fighting against the Amalekites, they prevailed, and when their hands went down, they were beaten. So here's God. He's providing for his people. He has set them free. It's going to be a 3-month journey down to Sinai. Next session, we're going to join them in Sinai for a year and see God raise up his sons and daughters into a nation, and there's going to be a covenant that is going to be quite big. And next week, the whole complexion of Israel changes drastically. You won't want to miss it. God bless.
To continue the great adventure, turn now to the next audio tape or CD.